Peace and greetings, brothers and sisters.
Ireland, Scotland, and Egypt. During the past year, the Grand Lodge of England, Ireland, Scotland, and Egypt have marked this action of the Grand Orient of France with their disapproval and severed their fraternal relations with the Grand Orient of France. The Northern and Southern Supreme Councils have also taken such action. I know this Grand Lodge will do and faithfully by the ancient landmarks of the craft, and I trust it will take such action promptly and explicitly, but deliberately, as well indicate the integrity of the craft, and unite the Grand Lodge with every other over the Masonic world. No atheist can be made a Mason, and it follows that there can have no fellowship with atheists and irreligious liberties. The Grand Lodge of Freemasons in Ireland has passed the following resolution. Whereas the Grand Lodge of Ireland has received official notification that the Grand Orient of France has altered the first article of its constitution from its previous form and omitted therefrom as one of its fundamental principles belief in the existence of God and the immortality of the soul. The Grand Lodge of Ireland hereby resolves that the Grand Orient of France, having by such alteration rendered admissible as members of lodges within its jurisdiction. Isn't that what the Scottish Rite says in these days and times? That there's no divine teachings within the Masonic temple, that it's a fraternity. However, in the beginning of the reading, it specifically said that the Scottish was in disapproval and that divine teachings within the temple are ancient landmarks of the craft. But now they want to have a fraternity and just have parties and drink scotch and act like they know something. Persons who do not believe in the existence of a personal deity has thereby caused a breach in the foundation of ancient masonry and acted in violation of the first great principle of the order. And therefore, the Grand Lodge of Ireland hereby declares that it cannot continue to recognize the Grand Orient of France as Masonic body. And it hereby directs all lodges working under the Irish Constitution to decline receiving as Masons any person hailing from the Grand Orient of France or from any subordinate to lodge under its jurisdiction. Several months ago, the Grand Orient of France solemnly resolved that they would no longer recognize the existence of God in any Masonic rites, considering that Masonry is eminently a religious institution. But I thought they said it was a fraternity because they're liars and they switched up. Wholly uncertain, Christians and Jews being members with equal privileges, this repudiation of the deity is so extraordinary that the Grand Lodges of Scotland and England and some of the American lodges took similar action. Whether the great harm to the craft which the action of the Grand Orient has taken will generally disrupt the Mason Brotherhood is conjectural. The Orient has asked for a secret convention of brethren in England, Scotland. The craft which the action of the Grand Orient has taken will generally disrupt the Mason Brotherhood is conjectural. The Orient has asked for a secret convention of brethren in England, Scotland, Ireland, and the United States to meet to consider the matter. But it is not solely that the invitation will be accepted. It is more likely that the Grand Orient will be repudiated everywhere. But it's not, because in these days and times, that's who they're following. They say there's no religion within the temple. And it is admitted here, not only by Scottish, but Irish and England, that divine teachings are ancient landmarks of the craft. And they have turned away from that and they are godless. And they say that they're a fraternity because they're leading you to the blind, to the slaughter. The York Rite and or the northern jurisdiction claim against Albert Pike, saying he had no authority and was speaking down on him, saying he only had 1,000 members and all that. But Albert Pike specifically said, this isn't for the many, it's for the few. He claimed to have authority from Frederick the Great, not Grand Orient of France. He said he didn't want no communication with the Grand Orient of France. You know why? Because as we have in the previous minutes, the Grand Orient of France compiled all of the transcripts and manuscripts while their Christian conquest over the Moorish Empire. And that's how they got all the Moorish manuscripts. And then now they're messing it all up. And all of them are following the Grand Orient of France. You go look, they're all consolidated. And they say there's no religion within the temple. And again, they said that divine teachings are an ancient landmark to the craft. They have turned their backs on my great-great-grandfather, and they should be ashamed. Now, in regards to divine teachings within the temple, which they modernly call a lodge today, because if they called it a temple, you would know. But we're not speaking about dogma as Albert Pike would speak, because he said that the Bible was used for every evil perpetration against man. So in regards to so-called religion, we're not speaking of the Bible. We're speaking of ancient manuscripts, which are the Moorish manuscripts in regards to Islamism, the old time religion, not the modern Muslim Islam that you see today. We're speaking about Islamism with the red flag, green star that's over 50,000 years old. The 5 highest principles known to man: love, truth, peace, freedom, and justice. When Albert Pike transitioned, his last words was shalom, 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 which is really salam, salam, salam. Islam, peace, peace, peace. Greetings. I was going over some readings in regards to Albert Pike letter to Horace Greeley. And when I heard Horace Greeley, I automatically thought of the teachings from the Moors. They always teach about the Whiggamore Party. And Taj teaches in regards to the conscience Whigs, who was anti-slavery, and the Cotton Whigs, who was pro-slavery. Albert Pike, he wrote a letter to Greeley telling him that another man was a part of the Know Nothing Party, which is in opposition to Roman Catholics with their oath. We're going to go over the oath. As well, I wanted to point it out that they was in opposition to the political dynasty known as the family, the political machine that dominated the territorial and state Democratic Party until the eve of the Civil War. And we read over the South saying they would not have peace with the North or the United States or anyone until they had independence and nationality, because United States was trying to push the white and black caste system, supporting their institutions on slavery and inequality. Albert Pike has written a letter to Greeley's personal organ to certify that he saw Senator Wilson at a national convention.
Just putting it down on these Masons.
Thereupon, he cites the oath of the KN lodges to prove what Senator Wilson must have sworn in order to get there. He says this oath is as binding now as it was then. So if Greeley was a member of the Know Nothings, he would have knew that Senator Wilson was a member. But Albert Pike was sending this. Borland joined Albert Pike, Danley, former Whigs, and other anti-family elements in organizing a state Know Nothing party. James Yale published an anti-Catholic pamphlet that led to a series of violent attacks on the small Roman Catholic population in Little Rock. These events culminated in the party's victory in the capital city's municipal elections in 1856, and that was from the Encyclopedia of Arkansas. The Know Nothing candidate for the vice presidency. A card from Albert Pike. Sir, was Henry Wilson a Know Nothing? You say that you are constantly receiving letters asking an answer to this question. I will answer it. I was a delegate too and a member of the National Council of the Know Nothing Party in the summer of 1855 at Philadelphia.
And if you go look at the short, you'll see that the Know Nothing said that nationality is the healing balm and strengthening plaster, is what he said. And it's the sole rule of the order, nationality.
And one of 7 delegates from a southern state. I found President Senator Wilson in that body when I entered. He sat in it during the whole session and helped settle that platform. Being one of the 7 delegates of Massachusetts, to be there, he had to have the sign, word, and grip, and necessarily had taken the same oath that we had all taken on entering the order, not to assist in any way in elevating to any office of trust or profit any person of foreign birth or any Roman Catholics. The oath is as binding on him now as it was then.
You hear that? The Know Nothing said ain't no Catholics, ain't no Romans doing around here.
Office of trust or profit any person of foreign birth or any Roman Catholics, the oath is as binding on him now as it was then. My name will assure you that I know that of which I speak. I object to Mr. Wilson sneaking out of the scrape both presior veri and suggestio falsi. Albert Pike, Washington, August 1st, 1872. No intelligent citizen of any part of the United States needs to be told who Albert Pike is, and no one doubts his absolute veracity. We append to his statement above a copy of the Know Nothing Oath as administered in the Massachusetts lodges and forwarded to us by a reputable and responsible Massachusetts Know Nothing. Mr. Pike has seen this and vouches for it as the same obligation which he took himself. If Senator Wilson
That means they are not to let any Roman Catholics into any offices, into any governments or anything.
should become president, he would thus be kept by an oath from appointing to and bound to use all his influence to prevent their obtaining office. Perhaps he might prove as true as his obligation as did President Grant to those he took with Baez. We've already did the reading with Sidi Ali, who went to meet Grant at the White House in regards to him being the first Moorish citizen, and he had the image of President Grant on the wall. So now I'm gonna have to cross-reference because Sidi Ali was supposed to be the first.
And I'll go ahead and speak on that since there's a more here. In regards to Sidi Ali, on the Maxim Almanac, it has where he said he's the first Moorish American citizen, and he went to President Grant to the White House and met his wife and everything. And that's the same story in regards to Noble Drew Ali. So there's some kind of administration to these Moors going to the White House.
Moorish American citizen in Coney Island. And this is showing exactly who Albert Pike was always against. That was his foe, his adversary, the Fabian Society.
700 years ago at Almanara, King James conquered the Moorish ruler of Valencia province, and the Romans, many centuries before, knew the military importance of its strategic hills.
Family, the elite, the ones that want to support their institutions on slavery, mental slavery, and inequality, making you think white and black colorable terms, no nationality. The South has always wanted independence and nationality, quote unquote. I have a very potent reading from Albert Pike in regards to the dead and the living. He's speaking about the status of white and black in regards to black in Spanish being negra and Negro calling yourself death. Text of oath taken by Henry Wilson in 1854. In the presence of the true and ever living God and on these sacred scriptures, his holy word, I do declare that I will truly fulfill all my obligations toward my brethren of the order of Know Nothings, and that I will keep sacred all the signs, tokens, past and degree words, emblems, and proceedings of said order. And I further declare and solemnly swear that I will not knowingly vote for, appoint, or elect any person of foreign birth or a Roman Catholic to any office of the local or general administration of the American government. And I further declare and I swear that I will use all the means in my power to counteract and destroy the influence of foreigners and Roman Catholics in the administration of the government of the United States and in any and all parts thereof, both local and general. To all this, a free and voluntary obligation on my part without reservation. I pray that I might ever be able to remain true and steadfast, so help me God. They're speaking about the popes of Rome, the papal bull, the three-ring crown, claiming to have control over your spirit, soul, and your carnal flesh. Scott offering reward for stone threatened. Glasgow, Scotland, January 2nd, 1951. A Scot who offered a reward forward of Britain's stolen coronation stone said today he has received a letter warning. Traitors are shot. He is Ephraim Connor, a Glasgow businessman who with two other Scots put up 1,400 notes for information leading to the return of the stone. The stone, a symbol of Scottish nationality since 940 AD, was snatched from Westminster Abbey Christmas morning. Mr. Connor said the anonymous letter writer declared the stone means more to the Scottish people than money. The 458-pound chunk of sandstone used to stand in Scone Abbey in Perthshire. The kings of Scotland were crowned over the stone until it was seized as a war prize by England's King Edward in 1296. The Southern jurisdiction claimed the right to exclude the Bible and not be governed by it. See Pike's Transactions, 1870, Appendix, page 214. In the words of Albert Pike, the Bible is the only rule and law of York Masonry. We, without requiring our brethren to reject it, do not accept it as our code. I repeat, do not accept it as our code. You are aware, my brother, that it does not take a very cunning casuist to find in it the justifications of every
artillery ready, brother, for hours and hours. Honors to the Moors for raising me and teaching me the science to be able to pick falsehood off of the eye. Indeed.
beyond.
In the past, it was required that Job's daughters had a Masonic affiliation. In other words, they had to have a blood relative or a marriage relative that was a Master Mason. That rule has shifted a bit.
That rule has shifted. So
So as you heard in this demonstration in regards to the bloodline, the law being changed or switched or revised.
In the past, it was required that Job's daughters had a Masonic affiliation. In other words, they had to have a blood relative or a marriage relative that was a Master Mason. That rule has shifted a bit.
So as you heard in this demonstration in regards to the bloodline, the law being changed or switched or revised from the origin. You can go to the playlist and see in our appendix or our minutes in regards to the Pike daughters, the children of the Pike daughters, they have the authority, the perpetual authority over the Southern jurisdiction, beyond the grave from Albert Pike. But now they're speaking of the Job's daughters, and they're saying the law has been changed from you don't have to be the bloodline. You can just have a reference from someone. But no, the bloodline is more potent. And this man is saying that his children and him, in regards to the Job's daughters, is through what? Affiliation of someone giving a cosign for him. But if he's not bloodline, he can't supersede the power of those that are the bloodline. Lizzie Bell Pike, Rebecca Jane Pike, Benjamin Pike. And that is from my bloodline. So that supersedes. They also really showed themselves when they showed this logos in regards to the crescent. But this is what they say, de Molay or Jacques de Molay, where they speak of the Inquisition, the Christian crusades against Islam. And that's exactly what it is. You see a crown, but in regards to the crown, there's a fez on the inside. And that fez is Moorish. It is the Christian Inquisition, the colonization against the Moors. In regards, we already have this in the minutes too. In regards to Kenneth the Moor, one Christian Scottish Moor can kill three Moors. You can go look at the short we have up. It has a white shell with a red cross in the middle. And I do the reading in regards to the bloody red cross is celebration of the defeat over the Moors. Also, when looking into the so-called Job's daughters, it says they are to teach of how to be good citizens or teach citizenship. But they're not teaching nationality. To be in the nation of families in regards to citizenship, you have to respect and honor each other as nations, honoring your foremother and forefather, your bloodline. Albert Pike, the Know Nothing Convention, the only means to bind the secret order together as a national party, a set of consulting doctors who have met to discuss the various diseases inflicting injury upon the midnight plotters. They're speaking of the ills of society, and by their boisterous and high-sounding speeches, at last to arrive at a point where these diseases can all be made to center into one, and then a universal balm, a strengthening plaster be applied so as to render nationality the sole rule of the order.
Indeed.
To Irishmen, the following calm and dispassionate remarks addressed to Irishmen, which we find in an exchange, are full of food for deep and earnest thought. Every thinking and consequently loyal Irishman will subscribe to their truth, and those of thus far unthinking, if they would read them, would see that every Irishman who now allies himself with the enemies of our government is himself an enemy of Ireland. It was thought that all men on the earth Irishmen would be, for the very instinct of nationality, true to the only government in whose future strength and greatness the liberty of Ireland reposes. And so are all wise and true Irishmen, but unfortunately for the cause of their country, they are sadly in the minority here. We knew that from the experience of last and the few preceding years, when all the eloquence and logic of patriotism were lavished upon these people, and in vain. We saw the course which they would take marked out by a hypocritical and treasonable newspaper, miserable pittance on their superstition, to reason with them. They do not read, they will not hear, they cannot understand, but like the swine in the parable, rush down into the Saddam pool of putrid democracy and are choked. We will admonish disloyal Irishmen that the American heart is chilling toward the cause of their nationality and institution. We will begin to say you have abandoned us in our disaster. We will also forget you in your distress. When you ask us to enter your churches, we will refuse to join the congregation of the enemies of freedom. When you ask us to send our children to your schools, we will refuse to have them instructed by a traitor. When you come before our legislation to ask the endowment of sectarian schools and asylums, female jails, and denominational colleges, we will reject your petitions. When you march the streets with the melancholy insignia of a lost nationality, I repeat, when you march the streets with the melancholy insignia of a lost nationality, we'll remember that when the lightning and exterminating war wrought their awful spectators on the sky, you were in confederacy with our enemy. You forsook us in the fiery ordeal of national regeneration. We will not care for your cause in the full splendors of our national glory. Do Irishmen ever ponder on these things? When carried away by excitement on the name of democracy, they go shrieking through the streets, shoulder to shoulder with the vowed enemies of the nations. And this is our ancestors speaking about how other ancestors left our lands of origin to go to the Americas for milk and honey and abandoned their land of origin. And that's what matters the most. If you're in a foreign land, we already did the Irish study in regards to all the Irish abandoning their lands, coming to America and immigrating through Ellis Island. And when you get naturalized as a U.S. citizen, you extinguish your nationality. You become white, which is a class caste system that the United States uses. And the South didn't agree on. We already went over that. But I just wanted to show you what the ancestors said. Do Irishmen ever ponder on these things when carried away by excitement in the name of democracy? Because they was all running to the Americas like everyone does. They think they're going to get the American dream, milk and
That's what I said. They thought they was coming for milk and honey, but they ended up getting vinegar, pine sap, and a hurt back.
honey, and they abandon their lands. Meanwhile, those de facto governments go back to your lands and take them over. And you're coming here naturalizing, extinguishing your nationality. The United States thinks that they can make a melting pot of people and make a generic nationality. One nationality, the organization of parties or association based upon nationality for political action must be deprecated on the ground that such organizations are antagonistic to the genius of our institutions, and because in the past they have led to unhappy dissensions and serious consequences. Of course, there can be no objection to these organizations of our naturalized fellow citizens, which are designed to keep alive the better memories of their fatherland. On the other hand, they should be encouraged. The man who cherishes his mother is all the more likely to be a good husband and father. So the man who does homage the land of his birth while he declares his devotion to the land of his adoption and choice is much more likely to be a good citizen than one who entirely ignores the existence of the foremother or the
Did you hear that? We'll run that back.
land. On the other hand, they should be encouraged. The man who cherishes his mother is all the more likely to be a good husband and father. So the man who does homage the land of his birth while he declares his devotion to the land of his adoption and choice is much more likely to be a good citizen than one who entirely ignores the existence of the foremother or the forefather. And that's what they do today. They call themselves white. They don't care about their nationality. They think their culture is American. They call themselves American, but you're not. Your bloodline is not American. If someone's mother and father was from Ireland,
the bloodline is not American,
and they moved to China and they had a baby in China and that baby was American, they call themselves American, but you're not. Your bloodline is not American. If someone's mother and father was from Ireland and they moved to China and they had a baby in China and that baby was raised and it was Irish, they could not go around and say that they was Chinese just because they lived there their whole life. A bloodline is bloodline, sanguine. But when citizens, whether native born or naturalized, attempt to organize political parties based upon any factitious idea of race or nationality, the combination is vicious and dangerous in all its tendencies. It is of precisely the same narrow and bigoted character as the old Know Nothing organization. With this view of the matter, we regret to notice several movements in various parts of the country to organize political parties based on such nonsensical dangerous notions. One of these is an order of native-born citizens, secret in its organization, but undoubtedly intended for political influence in time. It is asserted that an attempt will be made at the convention of Irish-born citizens, soon to be held at Cleveland, to form a distinctive party with a view to secure a political importance with their numbers. Several attempts have been made by demagogues to mold the German element into a political party. Assumed leaders among our colorized citizens, particular in Philadelphia, are attempted to make a party of that race, but their nationality is Moorish American. See, other nations are still seeking themselves in the Americas because they've been messed up with the caste system, the white and black. All such combinations for political purposes are harmful. When a man rises to the performance of his duties as an American citizen, he should leave as unworthy of him the consideration of race, nativity, or profession in life. No, you're supposed to honor your foremothers and forefathers so that your days may be long upon the earth. They want you to forget and dishonor your foremothers and forefathers. It's time to go home to our land of origins, brothers and sisters, and receive economic rehabilitation.
And speaking of which, I was contacted by a mother who said that she'll give me land and bring me out to Cornell. And I already have all my little documents and stuff to go over there if I want. But she said she'll bring me out there and land and everything. And that's in Cornell, brothers. That's over there.
Repatriate back to your land of origin and declare and proclaim your nationality. whether you're Irish, Scottish, Cornish, Kentish, Celtic. The man who forswears all foreign potentates and old associations of a political character in consideration of his new American citizenship, he should hold to his contract and on no account enter any combination inconsistent with the nature of his oath. Well, U.S. citizens, you ain't never gave no oath to no constitution or no allegiance to no United States citizen or nothing. You've never gave that. And without a nationality, though, you're still seen as stateless. That's a de facto generic nationality. First proposed coat of arms of the United States, designed by Pierre Eugene. So immediately surrounding the shield, you see the 13 colonies.
Also, think about Pierre. That's French. That's French, man. That's French.
But let's go into the symbolism. At the top, you see a rose, which is referencing the War of Roses in regards to England. Next to it, you see the thistle, which is meaning Scotland. Then you have the harp, which is for Ireland. And we know that the harp is played while the boar's head is brought in, symbolizing the celebration of cutting off the Moor's head. Next to that, you see,
did you hear that? The boar's head.
Harp, which is for Ireland. And we know that the harp is played while the boar's head is brought in, symbolizing the celebration of cutting off the Moor's head. Next to that, you see the flower de luce for France. And we know the French had the French protectorate when colonizing the Moorish Empire.
Now look at the harp, brother. The harp is a 7, which is also the 10th letter in Hebrew, the yod, which means perfection of man, but they use it for the boar's head. They play the harp while they bring the boar's head in celebration again of the Moors getting their heads cut off. But you see the liberty cap hanging. This is the symbol. This is the symbol that I'm decoding. You see the liberty cap or the fez, or you see the liberty cap in the fez.
Then you have the imperial eagle saber for Germany or Austria. And the 6th, the Belgic lion for Holland. The double-headed eagle is also with the Scottish Rite, but the faces are facing east and west, and it has one body. And that is symbolizing, again, the Moorish Empire reaching from east all the way across the great Atlantic Ocean into the west.
I wanted to get into that, though. That's the Hittite double-headed eagle. In regards to Noble Drew Ali speaking about the Canaanites, and it said its brethren Hittites.
Is of Hittite origin. And the Moors are the bloodline of the Canaanites, Moabites, and Hittites. On the left, you see the mother holding up the stick, and it has the Moorish fez hanging from it, also known as the Liberty Cap of Freedom, which the abolitionists wore. But they tell you the abolitionists was trying to free the slaves, but in fact, they was of the bloodline of the Moors trying to free their brothers.
Now, I have an image of when, like, John Brown getting hung, and there's lined up in front of John Brown soldiers with fezzes and tassels. But they speak of, again, John Wilkes Booth dressed up as a soldier to go supposedly stand there and watch John Brown get hung. But he was an actor. So, like, was all this an act? You know what I'm saying? Because why was there fezzes and tassels there enforcing John Brown to get hung if John Brown was with the so-called uplifting of the Moors? You know what I'm saying? There's something up. I got to go into the John Brown study. I'm going to bring that up next, man. That's the next study I'm going to do is John Brown. Because why was the fez and tassel? Why did they execute John Brown? And why was John Wilkes Booth there dressed as a soldier? And he's an actor. You know what I'm saying? And all of these actors play bullshit within society with politics and all that.
So these symbols are pointing out the countries from which these states have been peopled. But none of them are from America. But their children today will jump up and down and swear to the death that they're American. But they're not American. Just because you're born in America, it don't make you American. If I'm born in Japan and I walk around talking about I'm Japanese, they will see me as crazy because I'm not honoring my bloodline. You're not honoring Austria, Germany, Ireland, Scotland, England. You're throwing away your ancestors' bloodline to call yourself what? White, and say you're American. But again, if you're born and raised in Japan, running around pale skinned European, talking about your Japanese, you're going to be seen as crazy. So the nations of the world look at all of you that are in America calling yourself Americans crazy. The true definition of American is the various copper tone peoples found on the continent by the Europeans. In the 17th and 18th centuries, the Cornish were scorned as backward peasants and punished for speaking their Celtic language. They struck back the only way they could. They turned to the ancient Cornish traditions of piracy and smuggling. Cornish records lured English ships into the rocky coast. The practice became widespread that the Cornish coast came to be called the graveyard of ships. In early 1990, Cornish nationalists sold shares in tin mines to thousands of Cornish, which they claimed exempt then from paying English taxes, based on the charter granted the Cornish tin miners by Henry VII in 1508. The charter ratified in 1511 exempted all tin miners and therefore shareholders in the mines from all English laws not ratified by the Stanary Court.
And that's because they was under the Moors. In regards to the Kernal, is the horned one, which is Venus. But we have the demonstrations up too. We might play it today. I don't know how much time we have left. We're only doing an hour here. Then I'm taking it down and I'm leaving.
In ancient tin miners that continues to function now often as a forum for nationalist views, the original Latin copy of the charter was discovered in 1980. In November 1998, the last tin mine to close was purchased by an investment company, always selling your land for crumbs. In March 1999, the charter was discovered in 1980. In November 1998, the last tin mine to close was purchased by an investment company, always selling your land for crumbs. In March 1999, the mine was reopened with 250 workers. Nonetheless, mining, although an integral part of Cornish history, is now nearly extinct and has lost its importance to the Cornish culture. Immigration remains the traditional answer to high unemployment and economic hardship, but the region's population has continued to grow due to the number of foreigners from other parts of lands settling in the region. The population grew by about 10% between 1990 and 2000, even though the native Cornish population declined. Cornwall is the poorest territory and has one of its highest rates of unemployment. Average weekly earnings in Cornwall are 23% below the national average. Your ancestors sold off your inheritance and left you broke, poor, and dumb, tongueless. Cornwall demands autonomy in a regional government and demands to be given self-government. Self-government can't be given to you. You have to demonstrate it. Demands for a regional parliament, greater financial autonomy, and protection for the traditional Cornish culture. But when it's given to you, you sell it off. The majority of the Cornish support demands for greater self-government. They claim that Cornwall belongs to the Cornish and has been so for the past 3,000 years. Cornwall does not belong to the Southwest of England Regional Development Agency, the government office of the Southwest English Heritage or English Nature. Activists want to restore Cornwall's own constitution based on the 1508 Royal Stanary Charter, which has never been abrogated.
Now listen to this, brother. They think they're getting freedom. You think you got some kind of freedom? You paid for it.
Expanding interest in the Cornish language mirrors growing support for devolution. There is a campaign to win support for Cornish to be included in the European Charter of Minority Languages. Minority means that you're minor-minded. It means that you're not a proper person in your...
Again, honors to you Moors for prepare me. We got 15 actual members of the Cornish Temple. And again, honors to the Moors for prepare me.
Mind. It has nothing to do with a population. It means that you are not of sound mind. You're not competent in the eyes of law. A charter of pardon was issued by Henry VII of England in 1508, reconfirming the rights of Cornwall's Stanary Parliament. How are you going to claim to be self-government, but want to use as a foundation
something that was created by Henry VII of England. But you say you're not governed by England because you want to be self-governed. So if you wonder why you feel oppressed, it's because they know you are incompetent. The Cornish stannaries were suspended as a consequence of the Cornish rebellion of 1497, which 1492 is when the Moors were taken over, because that's the Moorish Empire. So all this is saying is this little 1508 charter of pardon means that you are willing to be passive and put your head down, is what it means. And if you want to fight back in any way, it ended as a consequence of the Cornish rebellion of 1497, which 1492 is when the Moors were taken over, because that feel oppressed, it's because they know you are incompetent. The Cornish stannaries were suspended as a consequence of the Cornish rebellion of 1497, which 1492 is when the Moors were taken over, because that's the Moorish Empire. So all this is saying is this little 1508 charter of pardon means that you are willing to be passive and put your head down, is what it means. And if you want to fight back in any way, it can be suspended. Again, 1492 is when the Moors were took over. The Moors is who brought you out of darkness into marvelous light, taught you how to take baths, taught you law, taught you to stand upright, independent, and fearless. That's where your authority comes from, is from the Moors. That's the true Celtic culture. Henry VII restored them in return for a payment from the 10 miners. At the time, enormous sum of 1,000 to support his war on Scotland. Man, you are paying for an authority in addition to restoring the stannaries and pardoning to stand upright, independent, and fearless. That's where your authority comes from, is from the Moors. That's the true Celtic culture. Henry VII restored them in return for a payment from the 10 miners. At the time, enormous sum of 1,000 to support his war on Scotland. Man, you are paying for an authority in addition to restoring the stannaries and pardoning the people who participated in the rebellion. Henry's charter of pardon of 1508 provided that no new laws affecting minors should be enacted without the consent of 24 standards. In 1999, Cornwall was effectively awarded Objective 1 status, identifying it as one of EU's poorest nations. You allowed yourself to be labeled as the poorest nation. The Objective 1 program will bring grants of EU funds, raising Cornish hopes that their economic plight might finally be alleviated. Religion, he was speaking of nationality just for a little bit.
Prince Hall Freemasonry. To fully understand and appreciate the significance of Prince Hall Freemasonry led to the establishment of the oldest and largest predominantly African American fraternity in the United States. Prince Hall's story represents the struggles that Black men, women.
Now he done did another identification. Now he's saying Black. You just identified as African American, but now you're identifying as Black. You have to be specific. Law is specific.
His creation of Prince Hall Freemasonry serves as an exceptionally important reminder that the craft should be accessible to every man, regardless of his color, creed, or background.
Not true. Every man must identify with his foremothers and forefathers' bloodline. You must honor your foremothers and forefathers so that your days be long upon the earth. That's why you're calling yourself ambiguous identities. You don't know your national descent or your foremothers and forefathers' national appellations, which is El Day, Al, and Ali. They'll have you go 80 years through this Freemasonry and never tell you. You say your brotherhood, but all of your last nomens or your last names are different. You're supposed to be one family bearing one free national name. You are disrespectful.
In the early years of the Revolutionary War, Hall actively encouraged freed Blacks to serve the American colonial military. His reasoning for this was that if Blacks were instrumental in helping found the United States, it would support their cause for emancipation and equality.
So Prince Hall told his own brothers to help the colonialists, the colonizers, the one
in helping found the United States. It would support their cause for emancipation and equality.
So
colonial military. His reasoning for this was that if Blacks were instrumental in helping found the United States, It would support their cause for emancipation and equality.
So Prince Hall told his own brothers to help the colonialists, the colonizers, the ones who was committing genocide against the Moorish Empire. And he said to help them kiss their feet so maybe they'll help us in the end, to help them be recognized. United States.
Hey, any Prince Halls that hear this, you need to go over to the Moorish Science Temple of America, find a Grand Sheik and speak to them. Don't get mad at what I'm saying. This is the truth, and this ain't even from my tongue, is what this man's saying. But we're just breaking down and decoding, again, pulling the falsehood off of truth. So don't get mad or get emotional, Prince Hall Masons. Just go talk to the Moors at the Moorish Science Temple of America.
Was already recognized by the Moorish Empire to do commerce. I don't think you all are realizing the real history, and I don't think that you have the keys. This man was calling himself names that delude to slavery, but saying he was an abolitionist. Robert Purvis is who established the Underground Railroad, and he knew his grandmother was of Moorish descent, and he knew about the Moorish Empire. You even called the land that he was born in New England. That's the name of the colonizers. England was the ones who made us forget our tongue and took over the Moorish Empire, cutting off all the Moorish kings' heads and instituting Christianity, which Prince Hall, they said, was a member of the Christian church. You have not received any of these keys. You still call yourself names that delude to slavery.
I remember when I was locally I had a local newspaper, and then on the front it had a bunch of Asiatics that was, I guess, Shriners or something. They had the fezzes on. They bought some elder a wheelchair. I found out the mailing location. I went there and I knocked on the door and they cracked the door open. I said, brother, I seen you on the newspaper. I want to tell you about the Moors. I was like, I went and put all of the pamphlet together, the Holy Quran, the Moorish literature, everything. It was a thick pamphlet I made, and they just kept the door cracked. They cracked the door and I slid it through the door and they took it. After that, I still never heard from them. I'd call the number and I never could get a hold of them, but they know about the Moors.
Support their cause for emancipation and equality. In spite of their service, blacks did not receive racial equality at the end of the war.
Because you were supposed to hand back the gods of Europe and take on your foremothers and forefathers' names, the Moorish Americans, El Bey, Al, and Ali.
It was within this setting that Prince Hall, alongside other prominent blacks of the age, came together to propose legislation for equal rights. Prince Hall was vocal and coherent with his abolitionist views. Hall launched a movement called Back to Africa, which sought to secure funds from the legislature to support voluntary immigration back to Africa for black people who had been enslaved. The culmination of the movement was an immigration plea that was put together by Hall and 73 other African American delegates.
Noble Ali specifically said his movement wasn't a Back to Africa movement because you was already home, and you are already home. He set you up to put you back into slavery.
They presented the plea to the Massachusetts Senate, but it was not well received and ultimately failed.
To all the Prince Hall Masons, this is your land. Your ancestors was here before the European. The original definition of American are the various copper tone peoples found on the American continent by the Europeans. How are you going to try to ask immigrants who immigrated here running from St. James from the Christian Bible, whom you kiss in your degrees, for immigration to go back to Africa? So not only was he
I'll go ahead and speak on that too. We just heard what Albert Pike said in regards to the Bible, that it's used for every perpetration against man. But on the second degree of the Scottish Rite, they get on their knees on a pillow and smooch the Bible. They kiss the Bible. But the Bible is not to be used as our code, is what Albert Pike said. And that involves the Christian black codes.
Telling you to help the colonizer, he was trying to get you to abandon your own estate. Then the Europeans really had claim, because all of y'all would have left, which we have the proof also. They allowed a lot of different Asiatics who were enslaved to choose where they wanted to go, whether it was London, different places. And when they got there, within months, they was living on the streets, begging people to help them get back to their masters in America. You have so-called leaders of African countries.
Did you hear that?
Because all of y'all would have.
We have the actual reading about that where they said, all right, Asia, or all right, Negro, if you want to go back to wherever, choose where you want to go. And they went, and they couldn't even be upright and independent.
Left, which we have.
Which is why John Wilkes Booth said he's seen a master treat a servant better than a father treats his own son. And as you see today, Asiatics and Europeans, they're running around here not caring anything about their children or anything. Again, that's why John Wilkes Booth said that is I've seen a master treat a servant better than a father treated his son, because they running around here acting wild. Like Noble Drew Ali said, in the South, it was on them, the way they acted on themselves.
The proof also, they allowed a lot of different Asiatics who were enslaved to choose where they wanted to go, whether it was London, different places. And when they got there, within months, they was living on the streets, begging people to help them get back to their masters in America.
So about all the so-called slaves that escaped into Canaan land, which they generally or generically call Canada, why was they all running to so-called escape to Canaan land if once you got wherever you was going, you can't be independent? What was you going to do once you got there? You know what I'm saying? You've seen the movies where they're sitting there with open arms and all that. Well, what about these days and times? You can't go there now. They're going to say, show me a passport, or you're a felon. You can't even get in here. So what happened to the open arms? Because it was BS from the beginning that they was running gloriously.
You have so-called leaders of African countries apologizing about assisting in selling their own brothers to the Asiatics who were enslaved to choose where they wanted to go, whether it was London, different places. And when they got there, within months, they was living on the streets, begging people to help them get back to their masters in America. You have so-called leaders of African countries apologizing about assisting in selling their own brothers to the European. So you step up to a European and you say, why do you have my brother in slavery? And he says, well, your other brother sold him to me. Who are you going to jump on first? Yeah, they're both wrong. They're both wrong as shit. But what I'm saying is, they was buying them from your own brother. So calling yourself names that delude to slavery, or identifying yourself with names that the European placed upon you during oppression, of course you're going to still be oppressed. Like the Dred Scott case, it told you that people who call themselves black have no standing in law, because that's a name that's a dead status during slavery. It was oppression identification. So you was supposed to give back the European slave names and take on your ancestors' appellations. El Bey, Day, Al, and Ali. Them are the true holders of the estate of Americas, not just North, South, and Central, and across the great Atlantic Ocean onto what they call Africa. So it's all yours. So you'll give up all of your estate just for a little bit. It shows Prince Hall did not have the keys. So now we'll get back into as far as the race or what you call skin tone and all that. You could have a brother knock at my temple door, and when I answer it, he says, I'm white and I want to assist in this uplifting of fallen humanity. I'll look him dead in his face and tell him he ain't to join if he's calling himself white.
You hear that, Europeans? You ain't welcome in this temple if you're calling yourself colorable terms. But in regards to white, white means purity, purity means God, and God means ruler of the land. And we are not the rulers of the land here.
You could have a twin brother knock on my door and say, peace, brother, I'm of Irish descent, or I'm of Celtic descent, or I'm of Russian descent, or I'm of Moorish descent. May I come in? And I'll say, come on, brother, you're welcome. You want something to eat, something to drink? Here, brother, sit yourself down and make yourself a part of the furniture. It has Moorish descent. May I come in? And I'll say, come on, brother, you're welcome. You want something to eat, something to drink? Here, brother, sit yourself down and make yourself a part of the furniture. It has no difference about your skin tone.
You hear that? That's from the bloodline of Albert Pike, who you say was so racist and hate-filled. His bloodline saying if an Asiatic, a copper-toned man comes to the door at this temple, a Moor, who's saying he's Moorish American, he can sleep in my bed and I'll sleep on the floor. And that's coming from Albert Pike's bloodline. But he has to be a Moorish American. He can't be a black or a Negro. He has to be a Moorish American, honoring his foremothers and forefathers. And I'll sleep on the floor and he can sleep in the bed. But if you come here as Negro or black, or you come here talking about that white stuff, you're only going to get as far as this temple door, indeed.
But if you identify yourself with names of colors that delude to slavery, or you do not honor your foremothers and forefathers' nationality and divine creed, then we will not honor you. It has nothing to do with skin tone, but you mixed it up as such. Just like my forefather Albert Pike, he said he would not be sitting beside a Negro, but that is not the skin tone. He didn't honor the man because he didn't honor himself. He didn't call himself who his foremothers and forefathers called himself. But you could have a man
You
that
hear that? He said he's not going to sit by a Negro Mason. And we just broke down the history of Prince Hall setting up the Asiatics to fight for the colonists in hopes that after they so-called win, that they would get some kind of freedom. That's not the way to do it.
sitting beside a Negro, but that is creed, then we will not honor you. It has nothing to do with skin tone, but you mixed it up as such. Just like my forefather Albert Pike, he said he would not be sitting beside a Negro, but that is not the skin tone. He didn't honor the man because he didn't honor himself. He didn't call himself who his foremothers and forefathers called himself. But you could have a man that was very melanated sit beside Pike, and if he said, yes, brother, I'm Moorish American, he would have honored him as such. Now, just a regular.
Oh, really? Where's the proof to that? Where's the proof to that, Lateef? You're speaking about what Albert Pike would have did and not did. Where's the proof to that?
Morals and dogma. Whatever Hiram really was, he is the type, perhaps an imaginary type to us, of humanity in its highest phase. He's speaking about the Moors. But to us, it's an imaginary type because we never read morals and dogma. Whatever Hiram really was, he is the type, perhaps an imaginary type to us, of humanity in its highest phase. He's speaking about the Moors. But to us, it's an imaginary type because we never reach him, man. We're always in lower self. An exemplar of what man may and should become in the courses of ages because he knew he was going to awaken and run this race. In his progress towards the realization of his destiny, you have a destiny, Moors, an individual gifted with a glorious intellect, a noble soul. You have a noble soul, Moor, and this is Albert Pike, a fine organization and a perfectly balanced moral being, an earnest of what humanity may be. That's why Noble Drew Ali says, uplift fallen humanity. And what we believe it will be hereafter, be in God's good time, a possibility of the race made real.
Now, he said a fine organization. So who was organized and moving around at the time of Pike? He's speaking of Hiram, and we know that they have the casket in their chambers with the veil over it, that's symbolizing the shallow grave of the Moors. Whatever Hiram really was, he is the type, perhaps an imaginary type to us, because we never attain it, of humanity in its highest phase. He's speaking of Hiram Abiff. He's speaking about the Moors and should become in the course of ages. And now look at the Moors. They're uplifted, man. They know everything. They're the pinnacle of wisdom because of their prophet, Noble Drew Ali, which brought the message from Allah, which is an angel is the thought of Allah manifested in flesh. In his progress towards the realization of his destiny. And the Moors have a destiny that is not unknown. An individual gifted with a glorious intellect, a noble soul, a noble soul. That's what the Moors speak about. The prophet, Noble Drew Ali, gifted with a glorious intellect, a noble soul, a fine organization. So he's seen them in line and organized at that time. He said they have a fine organization and a perfectly balanced, moral being, an earnest of what humanity may be, because the Moors brought us out of darkness into light. Indeed. Whatever we believe, it will hereafter be in God's good time because Allah's the best of planners, the possibility of the race made real. And that race is the race towards nationality, because even Uncle Moore speaks about many faces will be turned white and black, and they will resurrect and have to run this race. And that's to the race of knowing thyself. I think we've been on here about an hour, brother, sister. I put my hour in today.